Hi, Ed.
Hey, how's it going?
Well, I have to wear this ridiculous getup for another couple weeks till my face looks like a normal human being again. But until that happens, everything's great.
You just look
Um,
like a poker player.
I look like a poker player, right? I look like some millennial poker players. Great, awesome. All right, so Ed, tell folks a little bit about you, and then I want to sort of drop you into a hypothetical.
Sure, all right. Ed Porter, I'm a fractional CRO, blue chip CRO, and I've been doing this for about 6 years or so. And I help a lot of companies fix revenue problems. Very general in nature, but that's one of the things I've been doing for the past 6 years. And I also moonlight as an investor. I've been working with some startups as an investor, invested in a VC fund a few years back.
Mhm.
And so kind of spreading the wings a little bit on the GTM landscape.
All right, fair enough. Okay, so here's my hypothetical. All right, you're fractional, so it's Monday 9 o'clock, and you've just walked into a brand new engagement with a brand new customer, first time you've ever, right? They're close to your house, so you decided to walk into the building because it's not virtual this time,
Literally.
right? Literally, you walk in, right? So, what's the dream scenario that you're walking into, and what's the nightmare scenario you're walking into?
Dream scenario would be the CEO and probably depending on their other C-suite, all in a room, standing up with a round of applause. As I enter the room, maybe there's a theme song playing,
It's a
but
banner like "Welcome,
yeah,
man."
yeah. But beyond that,
Oh,
would
it's a
be
dreamer.
people that are ready to kind of get out of their comfort zone and really handle and answer the questions that are really tough, which is often requires looking in the mirror. So that usually takes a month or two to kind of break those walls down. So if they were ready day one, that would be dream scenario and get vulnerable, get uncomfortable, and let's talk about how we really want to break things or break the norm to get to the next milestone and get into that growth. So that would be
So,
dream scenario.
right. What's the nightmare?
Nightmare scenario would be, oh, I totally forgot we had a meeting. Um, and I'll say that because we're human and things happen, but there's a there's a pretty big degree of change that's required when you're looking at growth. And it's not just everything happy and everything like, oh yeah, we're excited to grow. It really requires change. So when you start deprioritizing change efforts, that generally sets a good signal for the rest of the engagement that there's probably not a
Right.
lot of huge commitment to growth. So nightmare scenario would be, oh, forgot about the meeting, or what are you doing here? Some kind of unpreparedness for that meeting, because that I will use as, unfortunately, a bias for the rest of the engagement because it gives me a pretty good indication that this isn't really prioritized.
All right. No, that's good. All right. So, hi, Stacie.
Hi.
Stacie, tell folks a little bit about you, and then I want to ask about your nightmare and your dream.
Sure. Stacie Sussman, CRO of RevUp Advisory. We are a concierge growth consultancy. We handle everything under the sales and marketing umbrella. And at the end of the day, we're looking to grow businesses B2B specifically, revenue and sales at the end of the day. And we do that with people, process, and technology. And we do all of our work mostly in HubSpot and Salesforce.
Okay. So it's day one for you at this client because you have clients too, right? What is sort of like the warm bath dream scenario of walking into a client, and what's the like, oh my God, what have we signed up for? How did these people make it through vetting?
A dream scenario is a client comes to us in what I say a triage moment. They have like a complete bleed. For example, they're like, our lead scoring doesn't work and we have this big volume of leads. But what they really don't understand yet is what we do with go to market and sales and operations and marketing is it's like a ball of yarn. So they may have a lead scoring problem that may live in their marketing side of the commercial house.
Mm-hmm.
However, there's so many other problems that they have that they might not be willing to recognize yet. So we come in, fix this small triage, I call it the bleed, but then they let us do a growth audit where we can actually uncover the true issues. I say it's the invisible problems that they don't see
Right.
actually coming for their B2B company, but we see because we've done hundreds of these projects over the past decade plus.
What's the nightmare then for our client?
The nightmare scenario is we have someone at the C-suite level that isn't willing and flexible to change. So they want to grow the revenue at the end of the day, and that's why they hire us at Rev Up Advisory. But they're super resistant to actually taking our advice, implementing it, testing it, iterating it, and seeing the catapult of what we can do for them. And so then we're just constantly going back and forth of, let's go out and try this. And they just kind of are naysayers and say no. And I'll add the other thing is, when we work with clients, we give them homework. We ask them to do stuff because it's a collaborative effort
Sure.
here at Rev Up Advisory.
Same with
And
me. Yep.
exactly. And if they don't do their homework, just like my kids, we're not going to get anywhere. And
Yeah.
that's like, Ed, great, point you had. That's where I see it coming, where I'm like, oh, this engagement's just not going to go well.
All right. So, Stacie, here's the next part of this hypothetical scenario with this new client. Okay. It's not day 1 anymore. It's day 90. And you're passing someone in the hall there, and they say, hey, I was thinking about you yesterday, and we were having a conversation. We brought you in to do like X, and, that seems like a great decision. But the real aha moment for me and my team about what you've accomplished is what? What do they
That's a
not
great
realize
question.
how great it is until you've been there for a little while?
Yes. So we create stakeholder alignment across the commercial organization in sales and marketing. We have a client right now where sales and marketing essentially wouldn't talk to each other. They had this kind of like middle ops person that you ask the marketing ops person a question, you ask the sales ops person a question, but we never actually sit around the table as leaders and C-suites in marketing and sales and actually talk and have a conversation. And so we're with a client for over a year now, where we actually have weekly standings every Monday, where we talk about these issues in the customer journey across sales, marketing, and operations. And I think everyone in the organization is like, oh my God, we actually have time weekly on the calendar that we talk about things. And we're not just sending emails in a vacuum that get ignored at the end of the day, and it builds up resentment. So we break down the silos in the organization. And I think just being an outside consulting firm, it feels a lot safer to be able to do that. And people are more open to talking.
Yeah, no, that's good. All right. And Ed, how about you? What's sort of the aha moment that a client has, like, 3 months in, about what you're actually like achieving for them?
Yeah, sure. I think the big aha moment that I strive for is to recognize small wins. That's often associated too with people who really focused on the big goals, the quota attainment, obviously, or market share, increased customer wallet share, whatever the case may be. Is that's a very large output, but there are plenty of inputs. So I structure my meetings and engagements with clients where we tee off. It's kind of based on the old Rockefeller habits, but talks about your big wins. And we talk about big wins not in terms of monumental, but in terms of little things. So at the end of the 90 days, throughout those 90 days, there should be a series of wins. And they could be, Stacie said it great, of it's an aha moment where, hey, our teams are talking, and not only talking, but the next step is now they're proactively doing things. So that would be an example of an incremental win along the way of, hey, sales ops and marketing ops, they wound up having their own kind of one-on-one in, once a week, once a month, whatever the frequency is. So that would be really big for me, is to see, here's how the whole organization is talking about wins, and it's not relegated to just the big ones. Let's
Right.
talk very small, minute details, and let's get into celebrate you had a good conversation, you had a good internal meeting, you structured a meeting differently, so now it's 15 minutes instead of an hour. So let's talk about those wins, and let's get people focused on the inputs and not just the big outputs.
Okay. So the next hypothetical situation, very similar, talking to people, is this. Okay. You're on stage, you're the keynote speaker at this convention. There's 250 fractional CROs, consulting CROs in the audience. They all worked in corporate until yesterday. They're brand new, right? Now they might still work, but like this is the first time they're going to operate at this level in this kind of role. They're all about to go into like a new client situation, new employer, whatever, right? So you're going to give them a little talk, and you just finish this sentence for me, all right? Starting out in your first ever CRO kind of role, you're going to be shocked by what?
The lack of alignment.
Okay.
Stacie kind of talked about this a little bit, and I'll
Mhm.
expand on this. Is alignment can mean different things to different people, but the the thing that is fairly common that you're shocked by is that people internally don't talk to each other, and they do it at high levels, but not in the tactical battlefield. So then you get, especially with sales and marketing, is you the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. Marketing's writing content that the sales team isn't using.
Right.
So now we're talking about two different messages to the same audience, and it really is shocking when you get into. You mean you guys don't talk to each other? So that's the kind of the you'll be shocked by the alignment issues. And unless you've lived in a company like that, and especially if they're going from corporate America to startup, it's a night and day difference. Both
Mhm.
good and bad. I mean, there are pros and cons, but I think that's the big thing to be aware of is the lack of alignment that really does happen, and don't assume anything.
Stacie, how about you? What do you think is most of these folks are going to be surprised by when they start their first ever CRO kind of role?
First, I think this is a separate podcast and needs to be a master class because I have 2 decades of experience here. So that would be a whole other podcast. But to answer your question, I'll say boundary setting at the end of the day. I think consultants at the beginning say yes to basically everything. Can you do our operations? Can you do our SEO? Can you do our
Mhm.
PPC? Can you help us with our website? Can you help with design? Can you do our forecasting, pipelining? The answer is no. You cannot do everything unless you have built that muscle with a team of technical wizards and experts that we've built over decades of experience. However, I think people say yes to a lot of stuff at the beginning because they get afraid the next project, the next engagement, the next money is not going to come. So they end up overextending themselves. And I think you really need to focus on what you're really good at, your core zone of genius at the end of the day, and say, this is our niche. This is what we're really good at. This is what we're going to do. And if we don't do it, hey, go talk to my friend Ed over there.
Yeah.
He does another piece of that project, and I'm happy to introduce you and refer you. I think people get a little greedy and saying yes to so many things because they're not really good at boundary setting at the end of
Yeah.
the day. And that's where scope creep comes in, and there's a whole host of issues this rolls into.
I heard a great quote a couple weeks ago on a podcast, and it was that companies expect insiders to be generalists and outsiders to
Yes,
be specialists.
Hmm.
Right? And you run into trouble as an outsider when you try to be a generalist.
correct.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah,
Okay,
interesting.
so along those lines, Stacie, you're continuing your speech, right? And you're going to find most companies don't understand what.
Most companies don't understand go to market. They don't actually understand the nuances and the complexities of what that means. Also, it really depends on where you are in your growth stage. We deal with companies north of 10 million in ARR,
Mm-hmm.
recurring revenue models, B2B, and a $10 million company and a $25 million company fundamentally look differently. And I think most companies don't understand as they grow from a revenue inflection points, I call them 10 to 25, etc. They don't realize that their ICP changes, their products need to change, their foundations need to change. I think they just keep running the same plays. Oh, we're in SMB motion and now we're going to enterprise. So we're going to run the SMB motion for our new enterprise clients. And they're like, why isn't that working? So I feel like they don't go back to like the basics at the end of the day when they're introducing new growth inflection points, new products, new services, etc. And they just keep running so fast and then they don't understand why it's so hard at the end of the day.
No, that's good. And then Ed, what do you think? Right? Most companies just don't understand what.
I Accountability. I think this spreads rampant throughout, and also is part of the byproduct with alignment is you get into answers of, yeah, we've been paying this agency, and like, what are you getting? And well, not much. Well, what have you done about it? Not much. So, um, complacency really hits. There's always reasons that people can give you reasons why not all the time, but it ultimately does come down to there's not clearly defined expectations, and there's expectations are rarely followed through in terms of accountability. And this includes the even writing job descriptions, how terrible these job descriptions are and how terrible hiring is when they look for somebody. They want them to operate inside a box. I've been on 2 podcast episodes talking about this particular issue that just plagues me, but it ultimately comes down to a lack of clarity in whatever the objective is, the initiative is, the assignment, whatever it is, lack of clarity, and then followed by complete lack of accountability. I find myself referencing the 5 dysfunctions of a team all the time
Mm-hmm.
with clients. I've suggested we go through this book, and that book is 15 years old, maybe 20 at this point, but it does come down to the lack of accountability and people not making the right moves, and fear of conflict is part of that in the pyramid of the 5 dysfunctions. So a lot of that runs rampant too.
All right. And then Ed, they're trying to like some intern is trying to usher you off stage, right? Like you've run over your allotted speaking time, but you got a lot to say. And so they're trying to like move you off. It's like the Oscars and the music's coming up. But by God,
right.
You're going to say one more thing before they get you off this stage. And you're saying, look, guys, this is going to be your first ever time as a CRO starting off. At the end of 90 days, one lesson you should have learned is what?
I think this was a hard one for me to learn, but to recognize we're all on the same team. There's a lot of finger pointing inside clients. Sometimes it's, Stacie mentioned this earlier about there's some problems they faced in the past where they're quick to point to a particular, well, we did this on Google Analytics and we saw this and we decided to increase our spend, and as a result, we're not going to do it. So I think there's a lot of this, but just to recognize that we're all on the same team and trying to achieve the same goal, and let's keep that in the offensive instead of looking at the defensive reactions about what happened in the past and using that.
Stacie, all of these brand new people, right, about to start their first ever CRO job, at the end of the 90-day mark, what lesson do you hope they'll have learned?
I think people don't ask the why question enough at the end of the day. Your
Mm-hmm.
client says, hey, we need this system fixed, or hey, we need this forecasting or pipeline reporting fixed. And people just go in and sort of tactically implement what that looks like. I ask my clients a ton of discovery questions. I ask them a ton of why questions. We like to go in the first 2 to 4 weeks and do a growth audit, because we need to understand the lay of the land, but we need to understand why things were done that way. And I have a client that will just say to me, we do it that way because my predecessor told me that's how it's been done. And who knows how long that's been going on? This could be 5 or 8 years later. And so when the executive team wants to understand metrics and revenue and goals and how it aligns to the executive vision, the team is just kind of running and doing things, but no one really stops and say, hey guys, why are we doing this? What's the goal for this? Or we've been doing it the same way for 3 years, but why do we do that? And I often find the answer is because, or we don't know, or a predecessor told us that. And I think it is a miss. And I think, Ed, that goes back to your point of like accountability. People are just so afraid to ask some of these hard questions because they're scared of their CEO, their CRO, their CMO, the boss, etc., that they just kind of do what they're said as good soldiers of the company. But at the end of the day, we're a consulting firm and we're an outside third-party vendor. And so I'm not afraid with our team to ask, why are we doing this? And that often leads to like magical moments of how we can grow the company if people are just open and honest with what their thoughts are.
All right. So they've moved you off the stage and now you've gone out onto the floor, right? Like there's a big convention, there's booths, lots of people, salespeople and marketing people behind a booth, but a lot of potential customers for you. So you're sort of milling around and you're having these conversations with folks, right? There's all of them, or many of them are prospects for you. So as you're talking to them and they're talking to you about, what they're trying to achieve and growth and sales and so on, right? What do they tend to talk about these days, your prospects, that you think they've overrated? And what do they not talk about enough that you think is just criminally underrated and everyone should pay more attention to? Stacie, like what's overrated when you're talking to people these days and what's underrated?
So I think everyone's so obsessed with the pipeline and the forecasting at the end of the day. They have to get that right. They have to look at, we're in 2025. We want to see what the quarters are going to look like. Now my clients are starting to shape out like 1H of the year. And so I think they become so obsessed with, are we going to hit our year? What does that look like? What I find to be so underrated and something we do really well at RevUp Advisory is attribution modeling. So how many prospects are coming into your orbit? What is the effort from marketing through your webinars, your ebooks, sponsorships, ads, etc.? And how does that tie back to actually closed won revenue at the end of the day? I've talked to $10 million ARR companies and I've talked to $100+ million ARR companies, and they cannot figure out that attribution across the customer journey. I think this is a new wave of thinking, and this is something we really do and specialize in at RevUp Advisory. And it's so interesting to me how so many of these companies have big ARR numbers, but they cannot figure this out at the end of the day. And I think one, it's lack of education, lack of understanding, the foundations aren't set up right. And honestly, someone hasn't come in to teach them that, because it's not something I learned with an MBA. It's something I've learned with boots on the ground, real world experience at RevUp Advisory.
Oh, that's good. And then Ed, how about you when you're talking to prospects? What do they tend to believe that you think's overrated, and what do they not pay enough attention to and so it's underrated?
Over-resourced and overvaluing the sales team, not necessarily the people, but just when you start looking at spend, I look at let's break out general and selling, and let's look at marketing spend, let's look at sales spend, let's look at customer support success spend, and let's start to look at spend, headcount, and then start to look at where your revenue comes from, recurring versus new, and spread it out. And there's always, actually one time there wasn't with the clients that I have, one time, but every other one, there is an exorbitant spend on sales and teams and hiring people and bodies to grow revenue, and that is very, very, very bad and gets them into a lot of trouble. So that's kind of the overvalued part of it, is the sales team, personnel, headcount,
They think
and
more
then
salespeople
ultimately,
equals more sales. That's an
right.
ironclad.
It's like, let's hire a salesperson, give $1 million quota or a $500,000 quota,
Yeah.
and then that's how we grow our revenue. So yeah, that's the overvalued side, is over reliance on the sales team to do everything. The underrated, which this is usually a little bit more harder to get to, but the lack of alignment between marketing and customer success. And we start looking at what new customers are we going after to try and really relate that to who are the current customers we're serving, what problems are we selling. And the thing that gets missed the most often is, well, great, people buy for A, B, C reason. Well, why do they buy again? And if you're looking at recurring revenue models, is why do they renew? Does anybody ask that? And starting to figure out, well, now you've had a year under the belt, why are you renewing? Like, what? So there's that information gets missed. So when marketing starts distributing content to new prospects, we're missing that persona match. We're missing that ICP match, particularly around problems that we're solving. So that's a very underrated alignment issue between those two departments, to make sure that they're hand in hand in serving the customers, solving the right problems, taking that back to marketing to write content. That's going to arm the sales team with a heck of a lot more content to be able to attract new customers. Stacie talked about attribution. That's a great way to say attribute source, but then also attribute other demographics. Let's look at problem solving, and let's look at aligning problems to certain personas. You may be solving multiple problems for multiple personas, and two of those personas are not in the buying decision. We got a big disconnection. So I think that gets a real big undervalued, as these alignment between marketing and customer success.
Yeah, good. Okay, so as we're talking to the new companies, prospects, and so on, what do you think? This is sort of a broad question, so give you some room on this one. And what do you think defines sales and selling in 2025 versus 2020?
What defines sales?
What's different now from 2020?
Oh, I think the better question would be, what's the same? I think that's not better, but that would be probably easier to answer. I
Shorter
think
answer. Yeah.
what's different now is your buyer is much harder to get a hold of today.
Mhm.
This could be prospect, this could also be customer. There's so many companies that just have the initiative as let's go talk to customers and let's survey them, and that's hard. That's really hard to do now. People's time is limited, and when you start getting customer disconnection, there's certainly this attribution of, okay, well, now they have a higher propensity to not renew. So people's time is much harder to get, and especially when you're starting to look at go to market in marketing, in even sales development, business development. I mean, you talk about cold outreach, it's the worst channel in the world, but there's such an overabundance on hiring SDRs. And now we have AI that's coming into the mix. And now you have
Mhm.
automation. It's just, it is get going into spray and pray at this point because people's attention is limited and access to them is harder. So it's going to require more channels to augment, and it does come down a lot to how do you get into those circles where you can access buyers, and often it's in smaller doses as opposed to mass market SDR channel blasting and messaging. So I think that's the big thing that's different over the past 5 years is access to your buyers, whether it's potential buyer or existing buyer, is much harder, which requires a complete shift in how you're developing a either an acquisition strategy or a retention renewal strategy.
Stacie, what do you think? What's different about selling in 2025 versus 5 years ago?
Ed said it very beautifully,
Yeah.
but I have a talk that I say the old sales book should be burnt to the ground because people are running the same plays
Mhm.
from 2020 and we're in 2025. And honestly, I think nothing is the same. But I think what Ed said was right. There's channels and there's go to market strategy, right? And you need all these different channels, whether it's podcast, LinkedIn, book, private communities, webinar, ebook, dinners, sponsorships, etc. Like all these channels work as part of your sales strategy. And to be frank, all those channels can't be run out of sales. You're going to need marketing support to run
Right.
a bunch of those channels. And some of those channels you're going to have short term wins on, and some of those channels may take a year plus to turn around wins. And when I say wins, I'm saying close one revenue and new clients. But I think, Ed, you hit on something really important is that spray and pray model doesn't work. People stop emailing me into my inbox and LinkedIn like, I am an appointment setting company and we'll set you 10 appointments a month. Doesn't work. I have yet, Ed or Dean, I've yet to see it work. Please just stop emailing that to me. But what does work, I think, and what Ed, I think you're alluding to is I am part of these private invite only networking communities. And I know there's lots of CROs and CEOs and CMOs there. And we have meetups and dinners and retreats, etc. I think that's where the real great business will be done at the end of the day, because you're in a trusted circle that's actually vetted at the end of the day, than constantly spraying, setting up 5 different domains, sending out 1,000 emails. Like it
Yep.
just doesn't work anymore. And I mean, you're just hiring bodies and people, and honestly, you're just wasting your money at the end of the day.
Yep. Totally agree. Okay, so Stacie, time to wind down. We're getting there. So answer me this though: you're talking to a prospective client. Okay, what's a green flag and what's a red flag when you're talking to them? Like, oh yeah, this could be like great. This company sort of gets it, or this company shouldn't be hiring me or anybody else until they like get something right. What's one green flag and one red flag when you're talking to a prospect?
Yeah, let's talk about a proposal we recently sent. Referral from a vetted source that
Mhm.
we love and have worked with before. Client came to us and said, we hired and fired a other RevOps firm because they couldn't cut it, and they gave me a whole host of reasons. Then they said, and now we had a full-time employee come and kind of fill the gap of what that RevOps consulting firm did, and that didn't work either. And now we're looking for like a third option, which would be to hire a different RevOps firm or bring in like a
Oh my
fractional.
god.
I would say red flag for me was maybe it's not the people or the teams that you've been hired. Maybe it's the structure of how you're running and growing the company at the end of the day. And so that was a red flag for me. I would say green flag for me is other clients that have come to us and said the tried and true, we've tried everything and
Right.
we can't figure out how to grow, but we realize the talent and team that we have inside these walls of this building isn't going to get us to where we want to go. So we're open to hearing some other ideas of how we can do this because our board needs us to hit this $35 million revenue goal. And really, CEO, my ass is on the line if we don't get there. So I'm willing to bring in some outside resources to hear some other ideas at the end of the day. That would be a great engagement for us at Rip Up Advisory.
By the way, this is only episode 6 of this podcast series, so it's still pretty early, but you have just officially become the first person to say the word ass on this podcast. So good job. I'm filling out my bingo card. And Ed, how about you? What's a red flag and what's one green flag when you're talking to prospects?
Red flag for me is when they don't have any kind of past history or understanding of why they want to change. When we start getting into like why
Mm-hmm.
now, I believe in a 5 why questioning process of like, why do you want to change and why now? So when we start getting into this, they don't have a whole lot of reason other than like, we just need to grow our company. Well, okay, let's dive into that. So if that becomes a red flag where there's just not a lot more of an initiative because it is bias that I'm going to use, which is, well, then they're probably not going to be very good on the ownership. Stacie talks about we give
Sure.
clients homework assignments. I think that's a great indication of you got skin in the game. So the red flags are really just, why are you looking at doing something now when they're making an investment in money? You can often be under the gun. There is that you become the problem, and now you're one of 3 different people that they hired in the past that didn't work out. So that's a red flag when there's not a whole lot of discussion in the past about why and why now and why are
Right.
you looking to fund this now. Big red flag. Green
Okay.
flag for me is the opposite of that. And Stacie kind of talked about this too in her red flag moment, and I'm sure she goes down this path of asking, well, why didn't these last things work out? But I like to try and uncover, what have you done in the past? And I go down the kind of questioning path of why are we looking at changing now? What did you try in the past? What worked? What didn't work? Hindsight's 2020. If you could wave the wand, whatever you want to say it is, what would you do differently? And when I start getting good engagement that they've tried to hire an agency, they tried to hire a consultant, they tried to hire a fractional, they hired a full time. In Stacie's scenario, is great. I got a lot of meat on that stick to work with, and I'm going to start going down a lot of paths to say, why didn't that work out? What kind of clarification did you give to them? And we're going to ultimately get to that thing that Stacie alluded to, which is, did you really look in the mirror and maybe you're the problem and it's not them? So the green flag for me is just that there is a lot of that on the bone that I can go pick at. And that gives me a lot of avenues to go explore where I can get into the true problem. I differentiate pain point and problem by pain point is something you deal with, problem is something you're going to the doctor for. So if I can get to this point where I can take the pain points they have, relate them into problems, and they've said, I've gone to this specialist, or I've gone to this area, I've gone to my network, I've gone to meetings, or I've gone to associations. Okay, that gives me something that it is a big enough problem. So that's a green flag when for me is I like that they've done something about it and often had a failed experience because I can now bridge that gap and make sure I don't go down the same path that the previous ones did.
All right. Okay. So this has been great, both of you. Thanks so much for being here. Um, Ed, these days, who should reach out to you, and what's the best way to get to you?
Often CEOs, founders, that's generally who I need to work with in order
Right.
to make successful engagements. CROs are fine, but generally it's the CEO that's writing some checks. So CEOs, and it's really if generally as I can be as I fix revenue problems for CEOs. I mean, that's as clear cut as it is. Reaching out, I've got a website that's listed here, bluechipcro.com, on
Mhm.
LinkedIn under Ed Porter. There's only a few Ed Porters. One of them more popular than me, I think, is a council member in California, and another one is a photographer. So I think I'm number 3 there. So there's not a whole lot of Ed Porters there.
All right. And Stacie, how about you? Who should be contacting you these days and how?
B2B companies that are scaling to upwards of $10 million reoccurring revenue. They have some sort of technology associated with the company. We're industry agnostic, or they're in a legacy industry like a law firm or real estate or education, and they want to kind of flip the industry on their head, and they have a good idea of how to do that with some sort of product or service at the end of the day. How can you get in touch with me? My email's here, stacie@revupadvisory.com. Pretty simple. I am a LinkedIn, I'll call myself influencer. It's Stacie Sussman. I have over 8,000 followers, and I post content about everything we're talking about here all day, every day, five business days a week. And I also have a podcast, C-Suite Strategies. You can look me up, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, anywhere if you want to hear conversations like this.
All right. Sounds great. All right. Thank you both for being here. This has been fantastic. It was nice to see both of you again. And thanks everyone for watching, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.